Now, US President Donald Trump has signed an executive order to cut financial assistance to South Africa. He cited his disapproval of the country's land policy, as well as the genocide case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. The White House says it will formulate a plan to resettle white South African farmers and their families as refugees. Last week, Trump made unsubstantiated claims that South Africa is confiscating land, adding that certain classes of people were being treated very badly. His close ally, South African-born billionaire Elon Musk, has shared Trump's sentiments, saying white South Africans have been the victims of racist ownership laws. The most recent US government data shows that the United States allocated nearly $440 million in assistance to South Africa in 2023. I'm now joined by Jaco Minaar, Agri SA President, and Ayesha Kajee, an international relations expert. A very good afternoon to the both of you. Thank you so much for joining us. Ayesha, allow me to start off with you. And certainly, let's talk about South Africa and how it stands, how this executive order makes South Africa look in the context of its international relations.
Well, I think that what we're seeing right now is a sort of, the Trump effect Mark II and a flurry of executive orders, not least, of course, the one about South Africa and curtailing aid to South Africa. Now, you've mentioned that South Africa receives quite a large amount of aid from the US. Certainly, if that is curtailed, there will be an effect in South Africa, but also in the environs in the general region, because a large percentage of that aid goes towards health issues and healthcare and supporting the health budget, particularly in terms of HIV/AIDS. Some of it goes directly to the Department of Health, and much of it actually goes towards NGOs. And of course, as we know, in this country, many of those NGOs are supporting not only South African citizens, but citizens of other regional countries living in South Africa. So the effect of that is going to be huge. In international relations terms, it is merely going to be seen as an extension of the spat, if you will, between South Africa and the US, which began during the Biden administration, when South Africa a year ago took Israel to the International Court of Justice on the issue of the genocide, the ongoing genocide in Gaza, and then added to that the ethnic cleansing in the West Bank of Palestine. Now, we've also seen in recent days Mr. Trump's comments about that issue, saying that essentially the US will go in and take over Gaza and redevelop it, but that the native Palestinians, the indigenous people of the land, must leave. So it's essentially an endorsement of genocide, ethnic cleansing, and forced displacement of people from Palestine generally, which he is advocating. On the other hand, he is advocating refugee status for white South Africans, mainly of Afrikaner descent. Yet he has never advocated refugee status for other peoples around the world, including, you were talking just now about the situation in East Congo. What about the people in Kivu who have been displaced, some of them 3, 4, 5, 6 times? The people in Gaza itself who have been displaced multiple times as well, up to 6 or 7 times over the past 15 months. So we're seeing a very racist rhetoric, in essence, coming from Mr. Trump. Also racist in that it is looking at the land expropriation bill that was signed into law by President Ramaphosa last month as a bill basically that's going to be unfair to white South Africans. This is in the context 30 years after democracy began, where less than 7% of the population still owns more than 75% of the agrarian land. Now, I can ask you, is that actually a fair statistic? And most people anywhere in the world will say no, it is not fair when 7% of the people of a specific group of people own, or the people that make up 7% of the population own 3/4 of the land. That is anywhere, in anyone's book, not fair. And Mr. Ramaphosa has further emphasized that land expropriation without compensation will only be done in exceptional circumstances in a fair and just and equitable way for the public good, where the land is unused or clearly poses a danger. So there are conditions under which land expropriation without compensation will happen, and it certainly hasn't happened yet. Yet Mr. Trump is behaving as though it is happening and that people are being, pushed off their land and have nowhere to go and are therefore eligible for refugee
Well,
status.
Ayesha, you've obviously have a lot to say on the issue. Very, very passionate about those. Allow me to speak to Jaco. Jaco, thanks so much for joining us. Now, the US president has said that he disapproves of this new law, the Land Expropriation Act. You've also said in a statement, or at least Agri SA has said that it is disappointed by the signing of the expropriation bill into law by President Ramaphosa. Now, how much of President Trump's statement, much of which you would have learnt when I gave that intro, do you, as Agri SA, agree with?
I think as an agricultural organization and representing the agriculture, we disagree with his claim that there's land and confiscation all over the country and that it's a big thing that's happening in South Africa. That simply isn't true. What we experienced is that there is proper land transformation that's taking place, and we can go into the details of what Ayesha said into why there's so little farmland being transformed. There's a lot of reasons for that, and I think a lot of that was dealt with in the Mklante report as well. But as far as we are concerned, there's no large-scale land grabs, expropriation that's taking part in South Africa. That's why we thought to bring out a statement just to set that clear. However, we are still concerned about the expropriation law. We are concerned about certain definitions and the scope of the expropriation law and how wide it can be. And that's our concern, and that's a concern with a lot of other citizens of South Africa as well. I think the DA has taken it to court. It announced on Thursday that it's taken it to court, and specifically on the processes and the definitions that's in the Act.
Jaco, I imagine you agree that land reform is inevitable. Land reform should be conducted. How do you feel it should be done in order to be fair and beneficial to all?
I think the main point is you can't right a wrong with another wrong. So simply to expropriate without compensation all the land is simply not right. So what we feel is what stands in the Constitution. It must be fair. It must be a fair compensation for land. And I think this is what the current bill is trying to address. There are few exceptions. We would like the definitions just of the exceptions just to be more clear and not open-ended. And there's other definitions regarding the public interest and public purpose that we would like more definitions around it. And that's why we asked the President already last year to refer it back to Parliament or to the Constitutional Court just to clear out the definitions. Our concern is the interpretation of the law, how it will get So the interpretation could be quite open, and that's why we said we're going to look at a case-by-case basis. If we feel it doesn't fit within the Constitution, if it's not fair, then we will take it to court and defend the property rights, the property owners' rights in that regard.
Fair enough. Now Ayesha, what might South Africa's foreign policy look like in order to adapt to the demands of President Trump? And I paraphrase, but President Cyril Ramaphosa has said in an interview in the past that President Donald Trump knows very little about South Africa's land reform program or expropriation. In fact, the United States on its own has its own expropriation laws. So is there pressure for South Africa's foreign policy to adapt? Do you advise that it should, or should President Ramaphosa continue to take a stand?
Well, I applaud President Ramaphosa for saying that we will not be bullied on these issues, that it is high time that more land is transferred from the hands of white people into the hands of black people in a fair and equitable way. And as Jaco said, on perhaps a case-by-case basis. That is why we do have a constitutional court as well. So, you know, it's certainly not the kind of land expropriation, I hope, that we saw, 20 years post-Zimbabwean democracy, that began in the Mugabe era and literally decimated the agricultural sector in Zimbabwe. We certainly don't want to go down that route. But at the same time, we want to be fair to the majority of our population rather than keeping not just land wealth, but all kinds of wealth, all kinds of economic power in the hands of a very small group of people. And that is largely white people and black elites. So we want to see that change from an international relations perspective. I don't think Mr. Ramaphosa is going to allow himself to be bullied on this, certainly not on the land issues, certainly not on the Gaza and even the Iran issues. I would say that most people viewing Mr. Trump's remarks, reading the executive order, will see that there is a clear racial bias behind this, particularly in this invitation for Afrikaners to claim a refugee status in the United States. Mr. Ramaphosa has addressed the issue.
Please allow me
to come in. He has spoken to Elon Musk himself. And the Department of International Relations has also issued a statement. So I think we're not going to see too much of a change in the status quo.
Okay, thanks. Jaco, very, very quickly, the implications of this executive order is obviously going to impact farmers that are exporting to markets in the United States. What are the conversations that you're having with members of Agri SA and others in the agricultural sector?
I think we're still not sure whether it will affect AGOA. It will certainly affect medical care and other things that we received from the US. So we're still not sure on what the impact is going to be. At the end of the day, it's going to cost the poor of this country the most. It's not going to affect the politicians that much, but if this effect comes in, it's going to affect the poor. And I think that's the saddest thing about this. It's the implication for the poor of the country is the worst.
Jaco Minaar, Agri SA President, and Ayesha Kajee, an international relations expert, unpacking for us that executive order and its implications on South Africa. Thank you both for your time this afternoon.